The Destro case has never been seen as a popular option in the watch fraternity. They make up for such a small percentage of options today, offered by very few brands. But for those who know, wearing a watch with the crown the opposite way, it's quite an experience. Now, I have been doing some intense research before this video began, and it turns out that I am left-handed, and that I've always worn a watch on my right wrist. So everything you're going to be hearing today is anecdotal. It comes from years of experience. And on the wrist today, for anyone who might be interested, is the Oris Divers 65. It's got such a divisive 1960s design. It's a peculiar watch, but I love wearing it for its obscurities. And it's going to appear in this video as a test sample as I run through the positives and negatives. Overall, it's a great design. It's a true 40mm diver with great attention to detail, especially the crown. The crown is often overlooked on a lot of pieces, but with some models, they manage to capture the age and the design of the crown excellently. Left-handers are a rare and attractive breed, so count yourself lucky if you are one. There are plenty of things we can do better than the regular right-hander, like opening and closing jars and lids, screwing and unscrewing nuts and bolts. That's about it. We can't use scissors to save our lives. But when it comes to wearing watches on the opposite wrist, when the crown is facing you, in my personal opinion, the positives far outweigh the negatives. So even before watching this video, know that I am all for wearing left-hand drive watches, but also know that there are some downsides to wearing a watch with this configuration to keep in mind. And it's interesting that people very seldomly criticize the crown's size, its width, its length, don't read into any of that, how it works on the wrist, or even the size of the crown guards for that matter. The whole comfort of a watch wearing experience is also closely linked to how the crown works, how it integrates with the watch's case. You know, we've seen over the decades that watches not only have gotten bigger, but their crowns followed suit. And there comes a point where the diameter of the watch, the width of the strap, and the crown combined can result in a very uncomfortable wearing experience. The fact that you struggle to flex your wrist fully, that there is a hindrance, and that you have to wear the watch further up your wrist. So why was the crown originally placed at the 3 o'clock position? Before automatic watches became the mainstay, small diameter, thin, mechanical, hand-wound watches with slim crowns were the peak of engineering. And since a larger percentage of the world wore their watches on their left wrists, the crown being placed at the 3 o'clock position made for much easier daily winding. And this makes a lot of sense, especially if you are daily wearing a hand-wound watch. The irony of it all is that as watches became self-winding or automatic, so then we started seeing their crowns become bigger and bigger. The professional watch grew in popularity and now featured screw-down crowns. For some strange reason, these crowns had to become bigger for easier gripping by the user. So the big question around this whole subject is, how often do you have to wind an automatic watch if you're wearing it 24/7? And crowns naturally became bigger over time when we look to the modern day pieces, I guess to fit with the criteria of being a professional-oriented instrument, also to match the proportions and the size of the cases they were now integrated with. The net result is that you get crazy models with automatic movements like the 6538 Submariner, others like the Panerai Luminor and the IWC Big Pilot. Watches with such overly proportioned and sized crowns that don't necessarily need to be there. So with all of the introductions out of the way, let's talk about the positives and negatives of left-hand watches. The first positive, you can admire more things on the side of the case. With the crown facing you, you can appreciate the details. Brands put a lot of effort into their crowns, often enough. Not only can you enjoy seeing the detail of the knurling, but you can also see the script or the logo used embossed on the front of it. You also get to appreciate things like crown guards, if they're pointed, if they're squared off. You get to see how watch pushers are integrated into the case. And when you look at it entirely, when it's on the wrist, it feels like a far more completed watch. In a way, this presentation feels more finished. It feels like it's there for your enjoyment. Another benefit is that the flat side of the case is making contact with objects and not the crown itself. A negative is that it looks odd. It looks strange when the watch is on the wrist. It looks strange off the wrist. Having the crown at the 3 o'clock position is something we've just become so accustomed to seeing. We're so used to seeing this formula that having it flipped to the other side throws everything out of whack. And I believe there are very few pieces today that manage to pull it off as effectively as models like the Pelagos left-hand drive, the Panerai Luminor, and a model like the Omega Ploprof. There are a handful of watches out there today that have such a great design that appear like that they have always been made to house a left-hand drive setup. But with some of the watches that don't fit into this criteria, that don't seem built for purpose, they do look off. Another positive of the left-hand drive is that it allows for bigger crowns. Take a watch like the Zinn Easy M3F. The longer crown, its increased knurling means it's easier to grip, but it also means that it can stay on the other side of the case and not interfere with the hand. Look again at the Omega Ploprof and see how that large case has been integrated in such a way that it was purposefully done. It not only completes the look of the watch, but functionally makes it work far better for the diver if he or she needs to use it. And with these bigger crowns, bigger crown guards can be included. And since we're on the same subject, bigger pushers can also be included. Since there is no interaction with the hand, it's essentially a blank canvas. Negative, they can be harder to wind and set. Now, in this brief demonstration, you will see how me as a left-hander have to set a right-handed watch. It might look painful to some, but yes, the watch has to come off the wrist, be turned upside down so that I can unscrew the crown, set the watch upside down, before having it in the correct position. In this one example, a Destro case would really help me. For the first time in my life, I would be able to set a watch looking at it the right way around. I might be the only one here who does this, but I feel that right-handers will be experiencing the same thing dealing with a left-hand watch. Now this can be seen as a deal breaker, but bear in mind that you're only doing this once in a while. The automatic watch with its continual power reserve, if it stays on your wrist, you won't have to worry about setting it. A huge positive of the left-hand drive is that the crown does not dig into your wrist. My heart goes out to any of you who have had to experience these crown calluses. They look terrible. And a lot of the time when you see big crowns on watches, they just look so uncomfortable on the left wrist. And that level of restriction must be frustrating. It feels amazing being able to do this without the watch interfering at all. It's a weird gesture. The negative of the left-hand drive is that the crown can snag on things, different things, snags on clothing, when a sleeve flows over it, or if you're dealing with wires or cables. Because there is no opening in the front for whatever's caught to be released, it being trapped essentially at the back can be a hindrance. But you have to weigh up, do you prefer the idea of the crown digging into your hand, or the simple hang-ups of sleeves sometimes being caught, or cables or whatever else? Personally, I would take the latter. A huge positive that needs to be overstated is that the left-hand drive watch lets you wear far bigger watches. Because the crown is not in the way, the diameter of the watch can increase, and it can also move further down your wrist. If you, for example, feel like 40mm is your maximum, I guarantee you that you will be able to wear a 42mm watch with the crown facing the other way. Not only will it be more comfortable wearing a bigger watch, but you also don't have to worry about the hassle of a large crown. A negative to left-hand drive watches is taking wrist shots. Even to this day, taking photos and sharing them on this platform or others, I find it peculiar seeing a watch on my wrist. It has to do with these cultural norms that we are so accustomed to seeing the crown facing the hand and not the other way around. Seeing this flipped configuration does make my brain work a little bit harder, and I'm sure it does for a lot of other people. So in the exact same way, the left-hand drive watch would give you this same effect. You have to turn your brain off from this cultural look and realize that it is going to photograph differently. But the last positive, and I would say one of the most important positives about wearing a left-hand drive watch, is that there is far better crown protection. Wearing a watch where the crown is not exposed to the elements, where it's actually protected by the bone of your arm, means that you don't need crown guards. There is never a time, or it's very seldom the case, that the crown makes contact with external surfaces. And this is far and above the most important thing to consider when you're dealing with a professional watch. You want that crown out of the way, because it's the most delicate thing you're dealing with on the outside of the case. And this alone is one of the main reasons why I implore more brands to incorporate left-hand drive watches into their collections. Not only are they fantastic to wear, it allows you to increase the dimensions and proportions of the watch on the wrist. You can increase the size of the crowns. On top of it all, the crown, the most delicate part of the watch, is also protected. So that's a quick summary of some of the most important positives and negatives that you should consider before owning a left-hand drive watch. From a personal experience, only ever dealing with right-hand watches, wearing them on my opposite wrist to how it should conventionally be worn, I don't think I would ever go in the direction of looking at a left-hand drive watch, purely because of having the crown out of the way, having it out of harm's way, but also out of the way of it being irritating on the hand. It makes the wearing experience so much more comfortable. But with it, being able to look down the barrel and appreciate the crown guards, the pushers, there is also tons of elements and visual intrigue that you can enjoy that others can't. My number one recommendation would be to look at the Pelagos left-hand drive. That watch looks like it was designed to fit the crown the other way around. Funny enough, there is a cool history linked to this watch and how it evolved and developed. how they were examples of left-hand drive military submariners, and that's where a lot of this actually originated. The dive watch was instrumental in the whole process of creating the left-hand drive, purely because the divers didn't want the crown interfering with their hands because they got bigger. Why the conventional norm is now to have the crown facing the hand, I don't understand it. I really don't. What can I say?